My friends laughed because I didn't order food, until the bill came and they demanded that I split it. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Emily, and I've never been the kind of person who asks for much. I work hard and live carefully, because my mom's medical bills eat up most of what I earn. Every dollar matters, so when my friends invited me out to dinner one weekend, I told myself I'd just show up for the company. I didn't want to seem rude, but I also couldn't afford a fancy meal. We went to a popular restaurant in town, the kind where appetizers alone are pricey. As soon as we sat down, my friends started flipping through the menu with big smiles, pointing out all the dishes they wanted. I looked too, but I knew better. When the waiter asked for my order, I just said, "Just water for me, thank you." Megan, the loud one who always had to be in control, raised her eyebrows and smirked. "Seriously? Just water," she said, her voice carrying across the table. Sarah, who usually followed Megan's lead, giggled like it was the funniest thing she'd heard all night. Jessica leaned in and whispered, "Oh, come on, live a little, Emily." But her eyes were sharp, not kind. Rachel didn't say much, but she had a little smile on her face too, like she enjoyed the show. I laughed it off and said I wasn't really hungry, but inside I felt small. I hated that they made such a scene out of it. While they ordered plates of pasta, steak, drinks, and desserts, I sat there sipping water, pretending it didn't bother me. They kept cracking jokes about me being too cheap or on a diet, and I smiled weakly, wishing the night would end. For most of the meal, I stayed quiet. They chatted about their jobs, their weekend plans, and all the trips they wanted to take. I tried to join in here and there, but they barely listened. It felt like I was just there to make them feel better about themselves, the one they could poke fun at without consequence. Then the check came. The waiter laid it down in the middle of the table, and without hesitation, Megan said, "Okay, let's just split it evenly." My stomach dropped. I stared at the bill, stacked high with items I hadn't touched, while my glass of water sat sweating in front of me. I reminded them softly, "I didn't order anything, remember?" But Megan rolled her eyes and said, "Come on, don't be difficult. Friendship isn't about money." The others laughed, nodding in agreement, like I was the one being unreasonable. That was the moment the laughter stopped sounding like jokes and started feeling like betrayal. The waiter placed the leather folder on the table, and Megan slid it toward herself without hesitation. She didn't even glance at the numbers before announcing, "All right, we'll just split this evenly. Makes it easier." Her tone was casual, like the matter had already been decided. Sarah nodded quickly. Jessica chimed in with an easy, "Yeah, of course." And Rachel stayed quiet but gave a small shrug, as if to say she agreed too. Emily's chest tightened. She leaned forward and said carefully, "But I didn't order anything. Just water." Her voice wasn't angry, only steady, reminding them of the truth they already knew. Megan looked up with a sharp grin, one corner of her mouth curling. "Friendship isn't about money. Stop being cheap," she said, her words cutting in the same mocking tone she had used earlier. Sarah giggled at the jab. Jessica added, "It's just a few bucks, Emily, don't make it weird." Even Rachel let out a breathy laugh, her eyes flicking away from Emily. The weight of their stares pressed on her. She could feel other diners around them enjoying their meals, unaware of the small storm happening at the corner table. The laughter from her own friends was louder than it should have been, echoing in her head until her cheeks burned. It wasn't just about the money. They were ganging up on her, dismissing her with jokes at her expense. Her throat tightened, but she refused to let them see how much it stung. She pulled out her wallet slowly, each movement deliberate, forcing her hands not to shake. Her cards slid across the table, joining theirs in the pile, even though she hadn't touched a single dish. Inside, a cold fire lit. She wasn't going to argue anymore in that moment. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of watching her break. But as she sat back in her chair, silent while they chuckled over nothing, she made a quiet promise to herself. This night wouldn't be forgotten. Their laughter, their smug looks, their careless cruelty, it had carved something permanent inside her. She kept her face neutral until the waiter returned and collected the cards, but the humiliation lingered. Her pride was bruised, yes, but not broken. While they thought they had forced her into silence, Emily was already writing the memory into stone. They had shown their true selves, and she had paid the price in more ways than one. When the receipts came back, Megan gathered them up triumphantly, as if she had accomplished something. The others carried on as though nothing had happened. Emily nodded, pretended everything was fine, and let the conversation flow without her. But inside, she wasn't empty. She was steady, holding onto the sting until it hardened into something stronger. She told herself, without speaking a word, that she would not forgive and she would not forget. Emily shut the door to her apartment harder than she meant to, the sound echoing through the small space. She dropped her bag on the couch and sank into it, her jaw clenched tight. The laughter from the restaurant still rang in her ears, every smirk and mocking glance replaying on a loop. The more she thought about it, the hotter her anger burned. They weren't strangers. These were people who had listened when she explained why she couldn't always join in on expensive outings. They had sat in her living room while she talked about working double shifts to cover bills. They knew about the nights she skipped meals so her mom could have her medicine. And still, with all that knowledge, they chose to make her the target of their jokes. The betrayal hit like a weight on her chest. She had thought loyalty mattered, that kindness would count for something. Instead, they'd turned her struggle into entertainment. Their voices twisted in her memory, Sarah's giggle, Jessica's condescending tone, Megan's sharp smirk. Even Rachel's silence felt like a knife. As she paced her apartment, she realized something she hadn't let herself admit before. This wasn't the first time. There had been little comments here and there, sly digs about her clothes, snide remarks about her car, all brushed off as teasing. She had always laughed along, telling herself it wasn't worth the fight. But tonight proved it wasn't harmless. It was deliberate. She sat down at the table and stared at her hand. She wasn't going to play that part anymore. She wouldn't keep letting them push her into corners just to make themselves feel better. They had enjoyed making her small because she never pushed back. That ended now. The anger cooled into something sharper, more focused. She started thinking about each of them in turn, peeling back the layers she had ignored. Megan, who always had to prove she was superior, flashing her designer bags and cutting down anyone who couldn't keep up. Sarah, so eager to please, never forming an opinion unless it matched Megan. Jessica, pretending to be supportive while slipping in sly insults with a smile. And Rachel, quiet but calculating, the one who kept her hands clean while still watching it all unfold. The pattern stood out clearer than ever: selfishness, greed, entitlement. They thrived on control, feeding off each other's arrogance, and she had been the easiest target in reach. But she wasn't going to be their punching bag anymore. She leaned back in her chair, the fire in her chest steadying into resolve. Tonight had opened her eyes, and she wasn't blind to them anymore. They had mocked her once too often, and though they didn't know it yet, the balance had shifted. She wasn't just angry, she was done playing their game. In the weeks that followed, Emily kept her smile in place, but it no longer reached her eyes. She still showed up when invited, answering texts and nodding at their stories, though inside she was pulling back inch by inch. She didn't give them a reason to question her, yet she no longer offered the warmth they had come to expect. Her laughter was lighter, her words carefully measured, her presence there but not fully given. From this quieter distance, she began to see things she hadn't wanted to before. Megan couldn't get through a single conversation without slipping in some detail about her latest purchase or trip, her voice sharp with pride. It wasn't sharing, it was showing off, a way to remind everyone she sat above them. Sarah, always by her side, echoed her opinions so quickly it was clear she didn't trust her own. Her nervous glances, the way she rushed to agree, betrayed just how much she feared falling out of favor. Jessica played her role as the sweet one, leaning across the table with her syrupy compliments, but Emily noticed the edges now. The little pauses before she spoke, the hidden smirk when she delivered a backhanded remark, the way she always framed herself as the generous friend while keeping others small. Rachel remained quieter than the rest, but Emily caught her listening with too much focus, storing up details, and then repeating them later when Megan wanted something to gossip about. The realization struck hard. They had been using her as their safety net. Whenever the mood dipped, a jab at Emily's expense was the quickest way to get everyone laughing. She had been the easy target, the one who never protested, the one who let herself shrink for the sake of keeping. But the peace had never been real. It had only been comfort for them, not for her. The more she saw it, the harder it became to pretend. One evening, as she sat across from them while Megan held court about her latest promotion, Emily caught herself smiling faintly, but it wasn't the old smile. It was something sharper, hidden beneath the surface. She felt the shift inside her, a quiet strength rising where the hurt had lived before. They thought she was still the same, still the one who would sit silently while they laughed. But she wasn't. Each remark they tossed her way no longer stung the same. It fueled something different. The mask of the agreeable girl was still there, but beneath it, Emily had started writing her own script. And this time, she wasn't planning to let them control the story. Megan was the one who sent the message, her usual upbeat tone spilling through every word. She suggested a Friday night dinner at a trendy spot downtown, promising it would be just like old times. Emily read it twice, her lips tightening before she typed back a short, agreeable reply. Outwardly, nothing seemed unusual. Inwardly, though, she had already decided she wouldn't be walking into this evening unprepared. The restaurant Megan chose was sleek, the kind of place where menus were printed on thick paper and the lighting made everything glow. Emily arrived on time, slipping into her seat with a soft smile. Her friends quickly joined, their voices filling the air as if nothing had ever gone. As menus opened, the pattern unfolded just as she knew it would. Megan spoke loudly about appetizers, suggesting 2 different plates before moving on to entrees with a practiced confidence. Sarah followed her lead, choosing the same dish Megan praised most. Jessica waved the waiter over for a cocktail with an umbrella in it, then laughed about adding dessert before the meal had even started. Rachel stayed quiet, but eventually pointed to one of the pricier items, murmuring she might try it for once. Emily folded her menu shut before the waiter returned. When asked, she replied politely, "Just water, please." Her voice was calm, steady. She didn't flinch when Megan gave a mocking laugh, nor when Jessica raised her brows in exaggerated surprise. "Here we go again," Megan teased, swirling her wine glass. The others chuckled, their eyes flicking toward Emily for a reaction. But she only tilted her head slightly, as though amused by the remark, and said nothing more. Her calm unsettled them for a moment before the conversation shifted back to their meals. Plates arrived one after another, piled high with rich food. The table filled with the clink of silverware and bursts of laughter as drinks flowed freely. Emily sat quietly, her glass of water cool in her hands, watching each of them fall into their familiar roles. She noticed how Megan monopolized the conversation, how Sarah clung to every word, how Jessica's laughter was just a touch too loud, how Rachel whispered comments when she thought no one was listening. Time passed, and eventually the evening slowed. Empty plates and half-finished glasses cluttered the table, signaling what Emily had been waiting for. The waiter returned with a black folder and set it neatly in the middle. Megan reached for it without hesitation, flipping it open with a satisfied grin. She glanced down, barely skimming the total, and said in her usual breezy way, "All right, easiest thing is we all just split it evenly." The words hung in the air, familiar and heavy. Emily kept her expression serene, her hands folded loosely on the table. This time, she wasn't caught off guard. She had walked into this dinner ready. The moment Megan finished speaking, Emily leaned slightly forward, her voice even and clear. "Actually, could you please separate the check by what each person ordered?" she asked the waiter. She didn't raise her tone, didn't sound angry, just matter of fact. The table went quiet. Megan blinked, her grin faltering as though she hadn't heard correctly. Sarah glanced at Jessica, waiting for someone else to jump in. Rachel fiddled with her fork, avoiding eye contact. The waiter nodded politely, jotting down a note. "Of course. Not a problem." He stepped away before anyone at the table could protest. Megan leaned closer, lowering her voice but keeping the sharp edge. "Emily, come on. Don't start this again. It's easier when we all just pay the same." Emily's calm didn't waver. "Easier for you," she replied softly. Jessica gave a quick laugh, the kind that wasn't really amused. "Don't make it awkward. It's just money, right? We've always done it this way." Emily reached into her bag and pulled out a small stack of folded slips. She laid them on the table, spreading them neatly. "I kept these from the last few dinners. Look at the totals. I paid for meals I never ate, drinks I never touched. Every single time." Sarah's mouth fell open. "You kept receipts?" "Yes," Emily answered, still measured. "Because I knew this would happen again." The air around the table shifted. Megan opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her cheeks reddened under the low lights. Jessica glanced down at the papers, her forced smile vanishing. Rachel stayed silent, her eyes fixed on the bills as though they were proof of something she'd tried to ignore. The waiter returned with the separated checks, placing them neatly in front of each person. No one laughed this time. The clatter of dishes from nearby tables filled the silence, harsher now that no voices covered it. Megan finally muttered, "This is ridiculous," but there was no conviction behind it. Sarah shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Jessica sipped the last of her drink, eyes lowered. Rachel slid her card across the table without a word. Emily picked up her single slip, the smallest one of all, and set down her payment. Her movements were calm, unhurried. She didn't need to raise her voice. The silence of the others was enough. Where there had once been laughter and teasing, now there was only unease. The waiter collected the cards quickly, sensing the tension. No one spoke while he walked away. For the first time in a long while, Emily felt no weight pressing on her chest. She had drawn a line, and their smug amusement had crumbled in front of witnesses. The jokes had died, leaving only the sharp edge of embarrassment. Megan broke the silence first, her voice sharp enough to cut through the tension. "You're being dramatic, Emily. It's dinner, not a courtroom. Nobody cares about your little receipts." Emily's eyes lifted from her check, steady and unblinking. "Dramatic?" she said, her tone calm but edged with steel. "You've laughed at me for years because I didn't keep up with you. You called me cheap when you knew exactly why I was careful. And every time I let it go. But tonight, you don't get to twist it." Megan scoffed, rolling her eyes, but Emily didn't pause. Her words spilled out, years of swallowed irritation surfacing at once. She turned her gaze toward Jessica. "You act like the kind one, always covering insults with a sweet smile. But I hear every jab, you just hide it better. Jessica's mouth opened as if to protest, but no sound came. Then to Sarah. And you? You never speak unless Megan does. You think agreeing with her makes you safe, but it only shows you don't have a voice of your own. Sarah flushed, her lips tightening, but she leaned closer to Megan as though seeking cover. Finally, Emily's eyes settled on Rachel. And you sit there, quiet, pretending you're not part of it. But you are. You laugh at the right moments, you spread things behind my back, and then you act innocent. You're not. Rachel's face remained still, her hands clasped together on the table, offering nothing. Jessica finally tried to interject, her voice nervous. Emily, come on, nobody meant. But Emily cut her off. Don't tell me it was a joke. Jokes don't humiliate someone who trusted you. The table seemed to shrink around them. Megan's smirk faltered. Sarah muttered under her breath. Jessica stared at her napkin, and Rachel kept her silence. The waiter returned then, placing the separated slips neatly in front of each woman. Emily picked up hers, just the price of water, and set her card down without hesitation. The others stared at their much larger totals, suddenly unwilling to meet each other's eyes. Pay for your own fun, Emily said quietly as she slid her chair back. Her tone wasn't loud, but it landed heavier than any shout could have. She rose from the table, smoothing her jacket as she did. The scrape of her chair against the floor echoed in the silence. Without looking back, she walked toward the door, the sound of her footsteps steady and unhurried. Behind her, voices began to rise. Megan hissed something at Sarah. Jessica tried to soothe. Rachel muttered under her. Their unity cracked, the edges of their alliance fraying in real time. Emily didn't need to hear the details. She knew what was happening. The same people who laughed at her were now left to argue over the very thing they'd forced onto her for years. Word spread quickly after that dinner, though not in the way Megan and Jessica expected. They wasted no time spinning their version, slipping remarks into conversations with people they thought would take their side. At gatherings, Megan exaggerated how Emily overreacted, while Jessica chimed in with her practiced sigh, pretending to feel sorry for the whole situation. But something shifted. For the first time, people didn't nod along so easily. The story didn't land the way they intended. A few asked questions, and when Emily was approached, she answered without drama. She didn't raise her voice, didn't blame or insult. She just laid out the facts. She explained how she'd paid for meals she never touched, how she had stayed quiet for years, and how she finally asked to pay only for her own share. Her steady tone carried more weight than all of Megan's dramatics. Listeners recognized the truth in her words, and the usual sympathy that Megan relied on began to slip away. Where Jessica's sugar-coated comments once drew agreement, now they sounded shallow, even insincere. Emily didn't chase the story. She went about her days as if nothing had changed, letting her silence speak louder than their attempts to smear her. She didn't need to defend herself constantly. The cracks in their credibility widened on their own. Mutual friends noticed the pattern. Megan always centering herself, Jessica adding fuel, Sarah agreeing blindly, and Rachel hovering with quiet complicity. Over time, invitations stopped flowing their way. People who once rushed to join their outings began making excuses. The group's reputation as the life of the party thinned, replaced with whispers about their treatment of others. They hadn't expected their own behavior to circle back, but it did, slowly eroding the pedestal they thought they stood on. Emily watched it happen from the sidelines, her calm presence more powerful than anything she could have said in anger. She no longer carried the sting of humiliation. Instead, she carried proof that their cruelty couldn't hold her down. The fun group they had once branded themselves as was unraveling, piece by piece, their grip loosening as others drifted away. What had once been laughter at her expense was now silence, replaced with uncomfortable glances when their names came up. And Emily, no longer their target, walked forward with her head high, while they stumbled in the space they had carved for themselves. It was a co-worker who let it slip, not out of malice but in casual conversation. Over lunch, she mentioned hearing Megan laugh at a party about having a charity case friend who made her look generous. Emily didn't need to ask who she meant. The words landed like a punch, but instead of knocking her down, they solidified what she already knew. The friendship had never been real. She had been kept close only to serve as a prop, someone to highlight Megan's supposed kindness. The sting was sharp, but it didn't last long. The betrayal wasn't new. It was only clearer now. Emily sat with the knowledge quietly, her decision to distance herself no longer just a choice but a necessity. There was no going back, no chance of repair. Whatever bond she had believed in had been an illusion. Days later, a message appeared in the group chat. Megan suggested another dinner, picking yet another pricey restaurant. Jessica added a string of excited emojis, Sarah quickly agreed, and Rachel gave her usual short reply. Then came Megan's tag. Emily, you're coming too, right? Emily stared at the screen for a long moment before typing her response. Not this time. Have fun. Nothing more. She hit send and set her phone down, feeling lighter than she had in months. When the evening came, she imagined the scene without her there. The table filled with cocktails, shared appetizers, and expensive entrees. The laughter ringing out at first, easy and loud. Then the familiar moment when the check landed, silence settling as eyes darted around. No one willing to shoulder the extra cost. No one volunteering to cover what didn't belong to them. Later, she heard from someone else who had been present. The harmony cracked once the numbers were divided. Megan pushed for an even split, but without Emily, the totals came out uneven, and resentment bubbled to the surface. Jessica tried smoothing things over. Sarah complained it wasn't fair. Rachel snapped back for the first time. What had once been brushed aside with Emily at the table now boiled over into open arguments. Emily didn't need to be there to witness it. She could picture the shifting expressions, the rising voices, the realization that their easy system had fallen apart the moment she stepped away. What should have been another night of indulgence ended in bitterness, the group leaving fractured and tense. And Emily, sitting quietly at home with her own simple meal, felt nothing but certainty. The truth had been revealed. She had never been their equal in their eyes, only a convenience. Now that she was gone, they were left to deal with the mess they had created. In the weeks that followed, Emily found herself thinking back over everything, not with anger but with a kind of quiet clarity. She had never raised her voice, never tried to humiliate them in return. She hadn't plotted schemes or sought to make them pay in dramatic ways. All she had done was step back, refusing to keep playing along. That was enough. The others, left to themselves, began to unravel. Without a common target to keep them bonded, small cracks widened into chasms. Megan's constant need for control grated on Sarah until the tension spilled out in sharp words. Jessica's sweet surface no longer covered her sharp edges, and people grew tired of the double meanings in her. Rachel's habit of whispering behind backs turned inward, sowing distrust even among the ones who once leaned on her silence. The unity that had seemed unshakable dissolved into fragments. Emily didn't watch it closely. She didn't need to. The stories reached her without effort. A canceled trip here, a fight over money there, missed calls that were never returned. The group that once strutted through every gathering as though they owned the room now barely appeared together at all. Meanwhile, Emily's world expanded in ways she hadn't expected. With the weight of their mockery gone, she found herself open to connections that felt lighter, kinder. She met people who listened when she spoke, who didn't measure her worth by the price of her clothes or the number of cocktails she ordered. Simple evenings, coffee after work, walks in the park, potluck dinners, held more joy than any expensive night out ever had. One evening, sitting at her kitchen table with a couple of new friends laughing around her, she felt something settle deep inside. She had traded noise for substance, pretense for honesty, and she realized she hadn't lost anything of value. She had only let go of what was never real to begin with. Every now and then, her mind drifted back to that night at the restaurant, the water glass sweating in front of her, the jeering looks, the sting of their laughter. For so long, that sound had haunted her. Now, when she replayed it, the weight was gone. Instead, it almost made her smile. Because the truth was clear, she hadn't needed to outwit them or force them to see her worth. She had simply walked away, and in doing so, she had taken their power with her. They had laughed at her once, certain she was beneath them. But in the end, she was the one who walked away free, while they stayed tangled in the web they had spun for themselves. The last laugh was hers, not because she mocked them in return, but because she no longer cared. She had chosen herself, and that was the quiet victory they would never understand. Do you think I made the right choice by walking away? Or should I have given them another chance? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more stories.